All right. In this video, we're going to talk about the consumer behavior and psychology of being happier. And again, I'd like to begin with the idea that happiness is important. In this case, there's a lot of research about the consequences of happiness, and it turns out that happier people are more creative, more productive, and more successful at work. They're healthier, they have less stroke, less heart disease, less cancer, less cold, stronger immune system. They have stronger and more intimate relationships, better romantic relationships, less divorce, they sleep better, they actually help other people more, they're viewed positively by other people. People see them as more confident and likable and even better at samurai swordsmanship, right? I saw in one article. They also get more pleasure and meaning from stuff like work and socialize. So even if happiness, on its own is not enough reason for you to really work on this, there's a lot of really good consequences of it that I'm sure you value. And if you look at this list, you see a lot of two-way relationships where the causal arrow goes both ways, right? You start sleeping better, you have better relationships, you do better at work, you're healthier. Of course, all those things are also causes of happiness. And that two-way causal relationship means that you can get a lot of upward or downward spirals when you think about happiness. And so it is hard to move our levels of happiness around too much. We tend to have a genetically predetermined baseline to happiness. But if you do one, or two minor things that actually make you happier, you'll probably find that you feel a little bit better about your friendships and your health and your sleeping, which in turn makes you happier, which in turn makes you more likely to do stuff like help other people, which makes you even happier, and so on. So the stuff that I'll be showing you in the next few slides can really make a huge difference in your overall happiness because it can create some of these virtuous cycles where you do it, you get happier, you do more of the stuff, you get happier, and so on. So how should we be happier? Well, I think the way in which we need to start understanding happiness is to start understanding what researchers call hedonic adaptation. And so hedonic adaptation is the idea that basically we adapt or we get used to all of the things that should give us pleasure. And to understand the power of hedonic adaptation, just consider all of the amazing things in society that exist right now, showers and refrigerators with food in them, and couches and cars, flushing toilets and clean socks, and all of these amazing things in our lives that we really don't get much happiness from. And if you look at the times before all of these things were invented, you would find that people weren't really any happier or any less happy. We're not happier because all of these things that should make us happy exist, which is to say we've basically fully adapted to all of these wonderful parts of society. So we adapt surprisingly quickly to things. And I emphasize the word surprisingly here because we mispredict this. And that actually matters a lot, our kind of understanding of hedonic adaptation. So there's some research by people like Dan Gilbert, which he is brilliant, talks really well in this TED Talk and in a book that I'll show you later about this idea of affective forecasting and hedonic adaptation and why this bias is really problematic. But the basic idea is that we don't understand what will make us happy, so we make bad decisions. If you get really rich, it turns out that you don't really get happier for very long. And people are really surprised by this. But there's a lot of data where you look at lottery winners and you find that even a year later, they're not any happier than they were before they won the lottery. It's striking, but it's true. We adapt to just about everything. We return to our happiness baseline level. And I think that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions that we have as humans. We walk around thinking, once I get that relationship or that promotion or that job, or once I get into the MBA program, I'll be happier. And then we get those things and we're not any happy. And then we have new goals and we say, well, once I achieve these goals, then I'll be happy. And, you kind of won't. You need to find other ways to seek out happiness than like, I'm going to achieve all my goals and then I'll just be coasting from then on. We as humans are problem oriented. you knock it out of the park in 9 out of 10 domains in your life, and you're gonna spend all your time stressing about that one area where you're struggling. So it's really hard to get happiness by like getting all of the things we want, because we adapt to them and we want more things. We call this the hedonic treadmill. You just keep running, you're not getting anywhere in terms of happiness. And so, yeah, for lottery winners, they don't stay happy, they adapt to it. And there's a bright side to this, which is that we also adapt to bad things. After you become paralyzed, people think that they'll probably be unhappy for a long time, and they actually end up just kind of returning to normal, right? That's their life, and there's good days and there's bad days, and their happiness kind of comes back to that baseline. So in understanding happiness, I think we have to understand hedonic adaptation. And the really big question there then is, what things don't we adapt to so much? How can we disrupt this hedonic adaptation? If there's all this stuff out there that should make us happy, but it doesn't, how can we, disrupt that hedonic adaptation, and how can we find things that actually do make us happy in a lasting way? And so to give you a little bit of understanding of hedonic adaptation, we'll begin with this question. Should you take breaks during massages? Should you take breaks during painful medical procedures? What if that break, what if you have a, let's say, 20-minute with a masseuse, and you can spend 4 of those 20 minutes in the middle taking a break? Will that make you like your massage more? You've reduced it from 20 to 16 minutes, but you've taken this break. And it turns out that breaks remove hedonic adaptation. So we should take a break during that massage, and we should not take a break during that painful medical procedure. And a lot of people actually get this opposite. You're in the dentist chair and everything's miserable, and the dentist says, hey, you want to take a break? And you're like, yes, I do. But you've actually kind of adapted to this unpleasant situation that you're in while you're having this treatment done on you. And the break disrupts that. So then it's even more miserable once you get it going again. Whereas in the case of a massage, you get adapted to that pretty quickly too. And then you take that break, and then you come back, and then it's even better. And so this is one of my major, number one tips for happiness is take breaks. If you're having a really enjoyable meal, put the fork down and take a break. And you'll find that you really enjoy your first bite, and then you kind of stop paying attention and stop enjoying this amazing meal that you're eating. But if you take that break, put that fork down, you can disrupt that hedonic adaptation. So that's probably the best way to do this is to just break things up, take breaks. There's also a lot of research about what we adapt to. And I think this is really key for our understanding of happiness. So we adapt less to things with uncertainty, novelty, variability, and surprise. There's one paper I really like where they went around a library and they gave people dollars, just $1 bills, to people studying in the library. And some of them they gave a really good explanation to, hey, here's why we're doing this. And some of them, they kind of told them why they were giving $1 to them, but they didn't really understand. And then if you go around a while later and you ask them how happy they are, you find that the people who didn't understand why they got that dollar were happier. They're uncertain about it, so they're still thinking about it, and because it's good, that makes them happier for longer. And so the things that are really good for us are the things that are a little uncertain. However, if that's a bad thing and it's uncertain, that's even worse because you can't adapt to it. Another one here is growth needs versus lower needs. So Abraham Maslow talks about the hierarchy of needs. At the bottom, you have things like food, security, and it makes sense that we adapt to food, right? First slice of pizza tastes awesome. Your fourth one, not nearly as awesome because you're no longer very hungry. And that's true of all of our needs. If you're lonely, you make a friend, feels great. Spend more time with that person, make new friends, you get less of a hedonic impact from that because you're not so lonely anymore. Given that we're always going to focus on our needs, and that satisfying our needs makes us get less hedonic impact from further satisfaction of that same need, it tells us that it would be great if there was a need that we didn't, adapt to, that we didn't get less and less enjoyment from. And according to Maslow, that's true of the growth needs, the meta-motivation or self-actualization needs. For these, the more you get, actually, the more you value them. And so the more growth that we're focused on, if I'm just really focused on getting more security or getting more self-esteem, I'm going to get less and less benefit from those because those needs are eventually going to be smaller and smaller as I satisfy them. That's not true of growth. And so I think a really nice message here is if you want to have someone really value you, satisfying their growth needs, helping them grow as a person, is a good way for them to continue to experience a lot of satisfaction and enjoyment from you. So you providing lasting value in the relationship. And another one here is we adapt less to things that influence how we spend our time. And so I would encourage you to really, really look at this list and really think about it, because this really determines our happiness. And it should influence, therefore, every decision that we make. And so let's say you're in a position where you get a promotion at work, but that promotion involves a much longer commute. So you're going to make $15,000 more per year, but you're going to have to commute for an extra, let's say, 40 minutes each way. So we've got an hour and 20 minutes versus worth of driving per day versus this nice increase in paycheck. What should we do? The way to answer this question is you say, okay, to what extent am I going to adapt to this negative thing of the commute, and to what extent am I going to adapt to this positive thing of the salary? And you look at this list. Does that increase in money involve uncertainty, novelty, variability, and surprise over time? No. Will it help me grow? Maybe a little. Will it influence how I spend my time? Not really. Maybe get a nicer car, some new hardwood floors, but we adapt to those things immediately, right? The new car, the new hardwood floors, these things we just get no lasting hedonic impact from. On the other side of this equation, we have this increase in our commute. Does that have these features? Does it have uncertainty, novelty, variability, and surprise? Yeah, sometimes there's traffic, we don't really know what we're gonna get as we go down that highway for an hour and 20 minutes every day. Does it influence how you spend your time? Yeah, absolutely. And so the research shows that driving, spending time in traffic is one of the worst things for our happiness. That's because we don't adapt to it. That's because it has these features like uncertainty and influencing how we spend our time. And so I'd encourage you, in any decision you make, think about what you're giving and gaining in this decision, but think especially about how those things interact with hedonic adaptation. We want to have good things that we don't adapt to. We want to have bad things that we do adapt to. And something like an increased commute versus an increase in salary is exactly the opposite on both those things. We adapt fast to money. We adapt slow to commute. Don't take that promotion. Another big factor here, both for happiness and hedonic adaptation, is engagement. Hedonic adaptation happens, at least in part, because we stop paying attention to these things, right? You stop looking at that fresh pair of socks and going, ah, yes, I love you socks. I'm really paying attention to the feel on my feet as I put you on. And it's the same with halfway through our meal, we kind of zone out, right? We really taste that first bite, we zone out, we've adapted. And so if we want to be happier, then we need to work on engagement. If we want to have things that we buy make us happy, we need those things to be engaging, to force us to focus on the present moment. And there's a paper that I love that looks at this. It's called A Wandering Mind is an Unhappy Mind. And he basically has people, have a little beeper go off. When it goes off, they answer what they're doing, what they're thinking about, and how happy they are. And the question then is, okay, how does that influence happiness? And what you find, of course, is that what you do influences how happy you are. Exercising, talking, playing, making love, these things make us happy compared to working or being on our computer. What we do does predict how happy we are. And the size of these circles is how much time we spend doing this thing. But the amazing thing from this paper is that what we're thinking about predicts our happiness even more than what we're doing. And that's amazing if you think about it, because we spend all of this time like, what should I do? I want to have a good, happy weekend. What should I do? What should I do? And very little time, what should I think about this weekend? And it turns out the best thing to think about is what you're doing. Not mind wandering makes us happier than even pleasant mind wandering. So having this engagement, this focus on the thing that we're doing is actually a really great way to be happy. There's a book by Eckhart Tolle called The Power of Now, which basically says that if you're anxious, you probably spend too much time thinking about the future. If you're depressed, you probably spend too much time thinking about the past. If you want to be happy, think about the moment, think about now. And that's like a really good solution to some of these major, major problems. So yeah, try to seek out these experiences. They're going to have engagement. One more note on this stuff. I've done some research on hedonic adaptation and novelty. And what we find is that, yeah, having variety in, let's say, what you're eating helps, because it's, you're not adapting to it if it's constantly new. But you can also even just interact, instead of changing like what you're eating or your job or your car or your relationship partner, you can just change how you interact with these things. If you eat the same boring food but eat it in different ways, right? I'm eating this popcorn with hand, I'm eating this one with chopsticks. That actually can produce lasting enjoyment. So we can disrupt hedonic adaptation by having novelty in the way in which we interact with things. And so I think that's another good one for something like having less adaptation towards, let's say, a relationship partner that we really want to continue to savor and appreciate. So that helps with engagement, right? It feels new because I'm consuming this old thing in this new way, so I'm paying attention, and that makes me enjoy it. Some other ways in which people talk about engagement are flow. There's a guy named Csikszentmihalyi. He has a book called Flow, and it basically says, hey, we're happiest when we're focused on what we're doing, when we're in a flow state. So we should seek those out, right? Playing music, reading a book, some video games. These are flow states, and they're really good for us. Mindfulness is another way in which people talk about this, and I'm sure you can Google mindfulness training and really make your life a lot happier. Some research basically says that, okay, given these understandings of happiness, what should we buy, right? How should we spend our money in a way that'll make us happier? And I think one of the main findings from this literature is buy experiences, not things. And that shouldn't surprise you if you've been paying attention, right? We adapt less to an experience than a thing because experiences have more variability and surprise, and they influence how I spend our time more than those new hardwood floors. Take that cooking class. It's variable, it's different, versus buying some new cooking equipment, which has none of those features which disrupt hedonic adaptation. Experiences also have more engagement, more anticipation, more remembering. Experiences are really good for happiness. And if you're interested in this idea of what should I buy to make myself happy, there's a book called, I think, Happy Money by Dunn and Norton. Two really brilliant people who study this stuff very well. And there's also just a short paper by Dunn and Gilbert and Wilson. I think it's called If Your Money Isn't Making You Happy, You're Not Spending It Right. So some good stuff to read about, okay, what should I buy to make myself happy? Some more happiness tips. There's a lot of research which tries to answer this question of, we want to randomly assign people to conditions. These people are going to do this thing for, let's say, a few weeks, 5 minutes a day, and we're going to see if it makes them happier than our control condition. And as far as I can tell, the most powerful intervention like this, randomly assign people to do this thing for a few minutes a day, and they get a lot happier, is gratitude journals. Write down 3 new things you're grateful for over something like 3 weeks, and you become happier. And the way this works is, I think, really fascinating, but basically the way the human mind works is the neural connections and neural pathways that exist in our brain get reinforced the more we use them, which is basically the same as saying, the more you think a thought, the more likely you are to think that thought in the future. And so this act of writing a gratitude journal is really an act of rewiring or purposefully programming our brain such that we make the feeling of gratitude stronger and more accessible and more available to us. And that's basically how it works. You do feel more gratitude even when you're not sitting there writing in that gratitude journal. And the research basically shows that, yeah, you do this for 5 minutes a day, 2 minutes a day for 3 weeks, and it changes your brain. It changes whether you basically walk through the world looking for positive things or negative things. You're rewiring your brain. It's amazing. And I think more generally, that way of thinking is a really good approach to trying to increase your happiness. You can reprogram and rewire your brain to think whatever feelings and thoughts that you want to think more. If you want to say, I wish I felt more love, you get online, you Google loving kindness meditation, you do that for, let's say, every day for a month, and you will feel more love. It really, really works. You sit around going through this practice of having this visualization of meditating and just imagining yourself like giving love to people, and you feel more love. And basically that's what meditation is, in my opinion, is training the brain to feel more happy feelings and think more happy thoughts, like gratitude, like love, like compassion, like calmness. And that's basically, I think, a big part of Buddhism. It's, in my opinion, less of like a conventional religion and more of a multi-thousand-year program of science of how to improve our brain's ability to be happy. So I think that's definitely something to, like, a good approach towards this. I want to think, I want to feel this more. I'm going to practice feeling it, and that's going to make me feel it more. Other things from this research: exercise and being outside are excellent. Some of the biggest effects on happiness: go for a jog or something, be outside, take a walk in the woods versus a walk in a hallway, really makes you happy and more calm. Religious services make a big difference here. Yoga, random acts of kindness is some stuff I've been reading about lately. And again, people mispredict this stuff. So if I go to an ice skating rink in Chicago, like the professor Nick Epley did, and I give people hot chocolate, and I ask them, would you be happier if you drank this hot chocolate or if you gave it away? People are like, it'd be better if I drank it, you know. But when you force them to give away that hot chocolate and ask them how happy they are, they're actually happier than if you let them drink it themselves. Being kind to others makes us happy. There's a similar finding in terms of spending money on yourself versus others. We think we'll be happier if we spend it on ourselves. We won't. Spending money on others makes people happy. And so for some of this stuff, you know, religious services, yoga, meditation, gratitude journals, exercise, these are actually lasting sources of happiness. These are ways to get off that hedonic treadmill. These are things that actually work in the long run. One more slide of these things. We've talked in another video about how relationships are huge for happiness. Invest in them, you know, work on them. The way I see it, we're really often strategic in a lot of aspects of our life, and really just kind of random and irrational in a lot of other aspects. And I think most of us are really strategic in maybe our approach to school or to business, but we're really not strategic in how can I improve my relationships? How can I be happier? And so I think just spending some time strategizing on this, because I expect most of this doesn't surprise you, right? Be kind to people, work on a relationship. You can be strategic about, do the things that I do make me happy? Do a happiness audit. Here's what I did, here's how happy I felt. Here's what I did, here's how happy I felt. And what you'll find is probably that spending a lot of time staring at social media on your phone doesn't make you happy. You're just kind of addicted to it, and you should therefore do that less. And this link leads to a video of Adam Alter, professor at NYU, talking about some of his research basically on that. These screens aren't really making us happy. Here's why. We should also prioritize growth and meaning. Stressing happiness isn't really good. Focusing more on meaning is a better approach here, and growth. Smile. There's some cool research which basically just says smiling makes us happy. And we've talked a little bit about habits. So using our understanding of habits and trying to use that for gratitude, right? If you can say, before I take my first bite of food for dinner every night, I will think of something I'm grateful for. What you've basically just done is make an implementation intention that'll really make you happier. It's a really, really useful skill. It'll become a habit. You've got this cue in your environment that reminds you that this is a good time to think about something that you're grateful for. That'll make you more grateful in the future. This stuff really works. You can do the same thing with, like, I'm going to look at these old pictures. I'm going to savor my meal more before I eat it. I'm going to be in the habit of saying yes when someone asks me for my help. All really good stuff. So a couple links here: how to make happiness a habit. And then obviously a big thing that gets in our way is stuff like stress and negative emotions. So learning how to manage that. And again, I would have to assume that meditation is one of the better approaches here. In general, I think if we spent 5% as much effort trying to pursue internal sources of happiness, trying to rewire our brain to feel more gratitude and feel more love. If we spent 5% as much effort on that as we spend pursuing external sources of happiness, like getting that promotion, getting that new car, we would probably be a lot better off. And so, you know, I think really considering it that way, what can I do to find more internal sources of happiness is really good. And that's basically, again, meditation. And there's a lot of wild research coming out over the last 10 years where they basically put monks in MRI machines and look at their brains. And you can actually measure how happy someone is. This subject in this picture is a guy named Matthew Ricard. He's considered one of the happiest people alive. And that's basically because he's a lifelong Buddhist monk. He spends a lot of time meditating. And if you put him in an MRI machine and look at something like left prefrontal activation compared to right, which is a measure of happiness, he's off the charts. You see a pretty traditional bell curve here, and you see him multiple standard deviations away. He's literally off the charts. And they find the same stuff when they put monks in MRI machines, EEG machines, when you look at how their immune system responds to threats, when you look at their like startle response in the face of a loud noise, immune functioning, recovery from stress. For a lot of people who do these brain scans, these monks are literally off the charts. It's really, really powerful stuff. And it's not necessarily that you have this beautiful brain and that makes you become a monk. Research from some of these labs, like Richard Davidson out of Wisconsin, he'll have regular people like you and I go through some meditation training, and you can start seeing noticeable differences in your brain. So this meditation stuff really seems to be a good source of happiness. So some more readings. I've talked a little bit about this work about here's what you should buy to make you happy. Dunn, Gilbert, and Wilson. If money doesn't make you happy, then you probably aren't spending it right. That's a good article to read. There's also a book, Happy Money by Liz Dunn and Michael Norton. If you liked the stuff about affective forecasting and hedonic adaptation, and you want kind of this really clever, fun, scientific approach, but written for regular people, I really recommend Stumbling Upon Happiness by Dan Gilbert. If you like this more meditative approach, I think anything by the Dalai Lama or literally any book about mindfulness and meditation would be great. We can start with The Art of Happiness. And finally, Yale has a Science of Wellbeing course. They put that online for free. You can take a Science of Wellbeing course from Yale for free. So that's another way to get more resources. And so with that, I will say thank you for watching these videos, and I wish you luck with your success and happiness in life. So long.